Joe Biden, President of America, has just announced the biggest price hikes for Medicare in history, funneling your money towards private insurers. And by coincidence, those private insurers donated loads of money to the Democrat Party, which is a coincidence. Hello there, you 5.6 million awakening wonders. Thank you very much for being with me today. Well done for being who you are. If no one's told you they love you today yet, then let me tell you, I love you. You're doing great. Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is just what I'm wearing today. If you don't subscribe yet, subscribe right now and turn on that notification bell so you know when we make a video. We upload every single day new content about global affairs, giving you the truth as best as we can understand it from a politically radical and spiritually optimistic perspective. That's why I'm wearing this kimono. Now let's see what Joe Biden's doing for the private insurers of the world. I mean, American people, who have always been Joe's priority. Oh, this is from The Lever. Last week, the Biden administration quietly reaffirmed its decision to enact the highest Medicare premium hikes in history right before this year's midterm elections. Is that a good time to do it? At the same time, President Joe Biden is endorsing a plan to funnel significantly more Medicare money to insurance companies and further privatize the government insurance program for older Americans and those with disabilities. Let's get those vulnerable people properly monetized. In effect, the higher premium increases will subsidize the larger payments to and profits for private insurance corporations. Have you got this terrible concern that during this time of suffering and price hikes, that the most powerful interests in the world are doing quite well? That's why I sometimes feel that these crises are not universally felt and why they're allowed to continue. Because what I experience as crises to ordinary people are times of great advantage and boon to the most powerful interests in the world. This comes after Biden raked in roughly $47 million from healthcare industry executives during his 2020 campaign. So, during the campaign, they had to use a rake, $47 million worth of healthcare industry donations. And now, while they're creating policy and regulating, those policies, by coincidence, are beneficial to those very same private insurance firms. But to say that there's a connection between receiving $47 million of money and then doing things that are nice for the people that give you that $47 million of money makes you a conspiracy theorist. The Biden administration announced on May 27th that due to legal and operational hurdles, Medicare recipients won't see their premiums lowered this year. As you know, we read your comments. That's why your comments are so important to us. And I see a lot of people saying, why are you always taking these shots at Biden and the Democrats? Why don't you talk about the Republicans in the same way? Well, one reason is the Democrats are currently in power. And this, in a way, is a perfect story because it shows you how the private insurers that funded the Democrat campaign are now benefiting from decisions made while in government by Biden. And these decisions cause suffering to the most vulnerable people in society. The elderly, the disabled, the very people we were invited to support by our compliance during lockdown, with our subservience and our obedience to lockdown regulation. We have to do this because of the elderly and the vulnerable. What, don't you care about them? What, do you want them to die? Go and have a vaccine. Go and sit down in your house. Shut your mouth. Well, now we get to see that when it comes to crunch time, Joe Biden will deliberately generate policies and price hikes that cause suffering in the elderly and disabled population, specifically because it benefits private insurers. The Medicare price hikes are the perfect example of Biden's corruption and systemic corruption generated by the financial relationship between the funders of the Democrat Party and the party itself. Now, I'm sure if the Republicans were in power, we'd have similar problems expressed in that manner. But how can you feel any support or sympathy, empathy or optimism for Biden's administration when this story shows that it is founded on corruption? Corruption that causes suffering to the most vulnerable people in society. The administration's announcement comes as Biden officials move forward with a jolting 8.5% hike in payments made to private insurers operating Medicare Advantage plans next year. The juxtaposition between dramatically increasing payments to private insurance plans that provide less care for higher costs on one hand hand and keeping seniors' premiums artificially inflated on the other underscores the Biden administration's conflicting commitments when it comes to Medicare. It also demonstrates hypocrisy, because if you campaign on the basis of care for ordinary Americans and a fairer society for everybody, and then when you're in power make decisions that are advantageous to the very interests that made donations during your campaign, what that looks like is not contradictory or competing interests, but hypocrisy and interests that are not competing, but that are perfectly in alignment with the interests of your donors. On the 2020 campaign trail, Biden pledged as president to continue to defend our nation's commitment to older Americans and people with disabilities through Medicare. If you can't rely on Joe Biden to protect the elderly, when he himself is the elderly, who can you rely on? But since taking office, Biden has expanded Medicare privatization by launching the involuntary ACO REACH program and through continuing to promote ever-increasing Medicare Advantage enrollment, and he has also raised premiums for Medicare recipients. The result, advocates say, is a situation in which Medicare's sturdiness as an American institution is being steadily chipped away by well-connected corporate interests. The privatization effort is reaching a frantic state, and Medicare Advantage is going to fail, said Bill Cadaret, president of the American Retirees Education Foundation, due to the fact that the plans must pay profits to investors, unlike traditional Medicare plans. The industry is hoping to cover up that failure with taxpayer subsidies, and none of the taxpayers understand. Isn't it interesting, really, that you have to obscure reality in order to conduct political business? That most people don't understand that these subsidies are being indirectly paid. And it also highlights the impropriety of medicine being privately funded in this way. You know that at some point in your life you will become sick, and of course your death, as well as the death of everybody that we love, is inevitable. And yet we continue to treat sickness in the abstract and allow it to be the domain of some of the most corrupted and powerful interests in the world, even though we've just experienced a pandemic where many basic principles appear to have been violated, most notably transparency and a willingness to trust organizations that are making incredible profits and are not willing to share data. Many dilemmas and situations connected to the pandemic expose the tension within the medical industry. You can see how this situation may have arisen when you understand how Biden's campaign was funded. All Medicare recipients pay premiums for outpatient care, which is called Medicare Part B. That money can be funneled into traditional government Medicare plans or into Medicare Advantage plans run by private insurers that are incentivized to limit the amount of care that elders receive. If you make the administration of healthcare and medicine a privatized interest that necessarily operates for profit, it means that they will have to reduce services in order to generate profit. In a way, it's obvious that this problem will occur as soon as you make the decision to privatize healthcare. It seems to me the only way that you can make healthcare effective is to entirely remove the profit motive. How would this negatively impact you if it became a service that was based on compassion and pragmatism rather than centralizing funds, taking taxpayer dollars and placing them into private hands? How would it affect you negatively as an ordinary American? The standard Part B premium for Medicare patients is now $170 per month, up 14.5% from last year when it was $148. Half of the increase in premiums came from a single drug, Aduhelm, which despite its June 2021 approval from the FDA to treat Alzheimer's disease is not proven to do so. This drug treats Alzheimer's. Does it? We can't prove that it does. We just hope it does because we want to sell you it for this amount of money. Sorry, what did you just say? In June 2021, Biden's FDA approved the drug Aduhelm for treatment of Alzheimer's, despite controversy involving alleged scientific disputes inside the agency over the drug's efficacy and industry pressure on the internal review process. When there's an internal dispute within the FDA about a drug's efficacy, what decision will ultimately be taken? The one that leads to profits, because as you know, the FDA is 45% funded by the companies that it regulates. In a sense, the entire system is built to generate the kind of challenges and problems that are being demonstrated here. So who benefits from the explosive rate increase? The major private insurance companies that helped bankroll Biden's 2020 presidential campaign. Medicare Advantage insurers such as United Healthcare, Anthem and CVS Aetna are celebrating record profits in the tens of billions of dollars, said Dr. Susan Rogers, president of Physicians for a National Healthcare Program. Their business plan is simple. inflate their Medicare payments by making seniors look sicker than they are, then pocket more of those Medicare dollars by ruthlessly denying seniors care. These seniors are very, very sick. We're going to need a lot more money. You're going to have to supplement it. Won't be able to afford to treat them. Oh yeah, no, you're right. We don't want loads of old people sick, especially the president's really, really old. He's going to need the help at some point. Go on then, give us the money. Right, out them seniors. We're not giving them that money. We need that for the profits. That's a proper racket, isn't it? You artificially inflate the price and then you do not deliver the implicit service. Meanwhile, more than 7 million seniors live in poverty and 7.3 million seniors are food insecure. During the pandemic, there were certain interests that benefited quite heavily, like, for example, the pharmaceutical industry. Weren't many of the regulations introduced during the pandemic for precisely this reason? We've got to protect the vulnerable. We've got to shut your business. We've got to lock you down because they're all vulnerable. See them, here they are. Oh, I'm so vulnerable. Right, okay, we'll shut down our business, we'll stop going out and we'll accept medical mandates, as long as it's to protect the vulnerable. Yeah, we've got to protect them. All right, pandemic's over now, it's been a real success. Ka-ching, ka-ching. Right, now, where's them vulnerable? I don't know, fuck them. This is a perfect opportunity to demonstrate that the vulnerable were indeed the purpose for all those draconian measures. Otherwise, what you have to start examining is, were those measures simply to increase the ability of centralized state power to regulate and control populations? From a pharmaceutical perspective, was it to generate profit? Does the lobbying industry in America control the outcomes of the political processes? Of course it does, but it's such a literal example. If the lockdowns and the medical mandating was underwritten by the sacredness of human life, then what policies would you see play out here? Vulnerable Americans would be protected. Instead of which, what you have is an inflation of the need of senior citizens when it comes to tax subsidies, but then they literally don't make good on those promises. That is racketeering. Meanwhile, research published Wednesday in the medical journal JAMA estimates that close to half of all new brand name prescription drugs launched in the US in 2020 and 2021 came with an original price tag of at least $150,000 a year, a finding that sparked fresh calls for Congress to rein in the pharmaceutical industry's virtually unchecked power to drive up costs, which, you remember, was a significant campaign pledge of the Democrat Party and of Joe Biden specifically. The new analysis finds that from 2008 to 2021, launch prices for new drugs increased exponentially by 20% a year. That's unregulated, unchecked profiteering that is demonstrably corrupt in this particular area because they have artificially inflated the price and the necessity for subsidies and then not delivered on the services. The study also shows that the median launch prices for prescription drugs soared from $2,115 per year in 2008 to a staggering $180,000 in 2021. How did that happen? That's ridiculous. That can't be inflation. That's gone out of control, hasn't it? If you went in a coma for 10 years because you'd lost your medicine and then they found it and you've gone into a coma, oh my God, how much do I owe you? You're not going to like it. $180,000? I'm going back into my coma, baby! The authors of the new analysis stress that prescription medicine prices are rising so quickly in the US because profit-seeking drug manufacturers are permitted to freely set prices after approval. Didn't you think that during the pandemic, too much power was granted to the pharmaceutical industry? And you know why it's happened, and you can see now in yet another example that is blessedly free from the kind of restrictions that are in place when talking about the pandemic and medicines that were prescribed and sometimes mandated there, that this is the mentality and the modality of that industry. And this is what their relationship with the government looks like. They freely set their prices after approval. They fund the FDA that offers the approval and grants the approval. The clinical trials are not a clear and transparent process. Drugs are released for Alzheimer's that are not proven to work for Alzheimer's. What's going on? Americans are already struggling to afford inflated prices on daily necessities, the Lower Drug Prices Now coalition wrote in a social media post on Wednesday. Big Pharma's yearly price hikes have pushed already sky-high drug prices into the stratosphere. There is at the moment a tendency to blame price inflation on matters that are beyond national and corporate control. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine. However, it increasingly seems that these price hikes are beneficial to corporate interests. A fairer measure of the necessity for these price hikes would be the profits of these kind of organizations and corporations. If their profits are continuing to increase, if their shareholder dividends are continuing to grow, then I suppose that is a powerful measure. But the degree of inflation and the ability for drug companies to set their own prices, the inability of the Democrat government to introduce price regulations that they promised pre-election, shows you once again the corruption within this system and the necessity for great skepticism when analysing their policies and their motives and before ever trusting them again. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either one of these, and please sign up to my mailing list right now so I can tell you about a plethora of live events both online and in real life that you will very much enjoy. Stay free.